Welcome to week 5. We just reviewed the coding challenge 4 solution. And in today's class, we are going to go through an introduction and an example for Express.js and EJS and learn what that actually is. Okay. So Express.js is a framework that's built on top of Node.js, which we learned last week. Now, it may feel like we just learned Node.js last week and this is too soon, but Express.js makes all of a little bit of the work of Node.js easier, okay? And it's basically used for building web applications, as we will do today, and APIs using JavaScript. Now, APIs is not exactly what you might think it is, but it's an application program interface. So it's basically going to help us send JSON code over the server that we create, right? So again, always have some speaker notes. So Express.js is a framework that extends the capabilities of Node.js. Let me expand this. Come on. Okay, better. Yeah, and it's specifically designed for building web applications and APIs. So it basically simplifies the task of like defining routes and handling JSON data. And it helps us write reliable and efficient code. Okay, so it's a starting point for many web applications. And how do we set that up? The first thing you need to do is Express.js is something that Node.js doesn't provide you already. So we'll have to install Express.js because it's another module. So similar to the FS module that we just saw with our coding challenge 4 solution discussion. If you had to use that module, I'm not sure if you had to install it. If you did, I'm sorry, we should have gone over that last week. But if whenever you want to use a module, if it's not already included in Node.js, then you'll have to install it yourself. So let's go ahead and do that. If you review today's class code that has been provided to you on Blackboard, oh, sorry, in that folder, you will find two subfolders. Okay, so I'll show you what it might look like. If you download today's class code, so lesson plans, week 5, okay, it's in this class code folder, week 5. So yes, you have been provided with a starter folder and a final. So final is what our end product will look like. If you want to follow along from scratch, then some just a bit of folder structure that you will require going forward has been provided here. It's not complete. We will work on understanding and completing it. So if you want to follow along, just either open this folder in VS Code. So I'm going to do that. I'll just make a copy of this in my downloads. Yes, and I'll open this in VS Code. Okay. So if you want to code along again from the start, use the starter folder. I'm going to open it in VS Code. So open folder, it's in my downloads, and that's it. Okay, so if you've opened it correctly, you should, if you open the folder correctly, that folder name should directly show up here in VS Code, and all the files in it should be right under it. And this is important because now on, when you try to run your server file, if it's not directly open in VS Code. So, and if this folder is not here and the first file that VS Code reads is not server.js, it might give you some errors because it's not sure about the complete location of server.js. Okay, so that might happen, which is why it's recommended that you just directly open your project folder under which all of your files are directly linked. Okay, so again, just to make sure your other files aren't open, just go to this file tab up here in VS Code, click on open folder and select the folder that you want to open. So all of my code is directly under here. I can't see it now, but I know these are the subfolders. So I'll just go back, make sure this folder is selected and open it in VS Code. All right. Again, for whoever's joined a little later, if you have any questions or something's not working at any point, just unmute and speak up because I'm not going back to, let me check the chat for now. I'm hoping not go back. Okay, I used fs read directory sync to read the files in the voter results folder. Trini, yeah, that works too. as long as you manage to, FS module makes it easier for you to read JSON files. But yes, I'm hoping everyone is at this point where you have your folder open over here. Okay, so you might notice that this folder structure is a little different as to what, so based on or compared to what we've seen so far, which is it has a server.js file outside, and this is where we'll define our Node.js server. Package package lock.json, if you open it and see what's inside, it basically is it has the information for all of the modules that are already present in this node modules folder. So if we click on this node modules folder, because this is our Node.js server, you have been provided with a node modules folder, which already consists of these different modules. So last week we worked with HTTP module and we set up our server, right? When we ran our Node.js code, this folder, I think it should have, if it didn't, it should have already appeared because HTTP is a Node.js module that we tried to use. I'm not sure if it was there. Even if it's not, going forward now, with Express, it's a module that we don't get by default just because Node.js is something we've installed. So we're going to have to manually install it. So right now, if it is installed, you would see that it is present in your Node modules folder. Okay. So all of these modules that come by default when you're creating your Node.js server, their information or their version and their other details is available on package lock JSON. Okay, that's what this file is. Any file that you install for your project, okay, that you go into your terminal and install, like we will do in a second, those modules information is there in your package.json file. Okay. Um, Again, so when you're working with Node.js, some modules aren't already available to you. So let's see if we have Node.js in our system. So I just opened the terminal in VS Code. If you just go up here and select terminal, new terminal, this is the shortcut that I use. Okay. And in here, if you type in node hyphen v and hit enter, it will tell me if you have Node.js installed from the previous weeks, then it should tell you that you have this version of Node.js installed, which means already in your computer, you have access to a lot of these modules. And that's why we were able to create our HTTP server last week. Now, this week specifically, in the starter file, yes, you have Express and EJS already installed. But if you've ever created a new project folder, you might not have the node modules folder, the package lock.json and package JSON. Views is something that we'll get to in a bit, okay, that we've created ourselves as well as server.js. But besides the, and public, sorry. But besides these three folders, okay, and folders and files, the rest we haven't created ourselves. Node.js has provided it to us. And how it does that is when we need a specific module, like in this case, Express.js, that doesn't is that it's an external module that you don't always need by default. So Node.js doesn't provide it to you. We have to install it if you want to use it. So to do that, I'm going to use a command line code, which is again npm install express save. Okay. Yes. So what this does is I don't remember what the save hyphen is for, but I will install it. So npm install express save, but I think save means it's not available globally, but I'll look it up in a second while you all are still doing this. But npm install express hyphen save. If you run this, it'll tell you that yes, it'll give you a couple of warnings and that's fine. And at the end, it'll basically install or make sure we have that package installed in our project folder. And while we're here, I'll just do the same thing for EJS. EJS is a module that we'll use a little later on in class today. But npm install EJS. Okay, if you even type just this much, don't have the save keyword, it's fine. Okay, I'm going to type npm install EJS and just to zoom in a bit in case. Okay, npm install EJS, and I'm going to hit enter. Okay, and that module will also get installed. And if you go back to your package.json file, you can, and I'll close my terminal for now, you can see that, okay, we have EJS and Express installed, these versions of it, and they are the dependencies of this current Node.js project that we have open. Okay, so any files or any modules that we've installed ourselves, just to check, instead of going through this big folder with all of these modules, which by the way, if you've installed something, you'll see a subfolder in that name. Okay, so we have EJS and we have Express. But instead of digging through this folder, if you want to make sure there is a module that you need has been installed or no, you will simply go to your package.json file and you'll see if that package is linked as one of the dependencies in your project. Okay, are we following so far? Yeah, did the modules get installed? Did anyone get any error or something's not working? If you want to create this folder yourself, as I said, public views, which we'll get in a second, views and server.js are the files and folders that we've created ourselves. The rest will become available to you when you, even if it's not, okay, or if it wasn't right now, if you simply run npm install in your terminal, once these files have been created, specifically server.js. Once you have that, if you simply run npm install, it will just basically install the necessary modules for you. Okay, and the node modules folder should appear, and that's just a note for when you're working on, like, for example, today's coding challenge. Okay, when you want to create your own Node.js a project, if you have, like, in our case, earlier we had const HTTP, where we use the constant HTTP. We had something like this, right? Last week, const HTTP equals require HTTP. So when you basically have your server code set up, if you run npm install, then it should install these node modules for you. If not, and going forward, you will use Express and EJS, simply run the terminal line code that we saw, npm install Express, and that should make the rest of these files available to you. Okay. And again, just double checking that, sorry, that we have the recording up and running for today. Yeah, we are. So you can refer back to this. Okay. So now that we have Express.js installed, let's get to using it and seeing how it's any different. Okay. So we'll read the anatomy before. Last week we saw part of this code, but it's a little different today. So there are different parts to our Express.js application. Firstly, just like we did last week. Okay. So last week we were creating our basic Node.js server for which we were using the HTTP module. Today, we'll try to use the Express framework. So the first thing you have to do is import the required module, which in this case is Express, right? And then we create an instance of it. So instance of it is, last week, you remember we created a server and then we were doing server.listen, which created and set up our server for us. And then we saw our responses in our browser. Similarly, if you want to use this Express module and call it again and again, it's easier to create an instance of it. Okay, so this again is something that you'll do for the upcoming classes, wherein you'll first import a module, you'll create an instance of it. In this case, our variable is not called Express, it's called app, and we'll define which port it's running on as well. In this case, we're using a Node.js application, but our server setup is going to be done using Express. Okay, so we don't need the HTTP module. We are creating an instance of Express by assigning it to a variable called app. Okay, and this is sort of, again, the protocol or the process you'll follow. This is the basic syntax that you will find on an Express.js website's documentation. Okay, once you have your instance, so server app setup, by calling the Express function, you're creating an Express app. Okay, last week we were creating a basic Node.js app. This week, we are building on it by creating an Express app, which is creating our Node.js project or server on our behalf, and you're only interacting with the front end of it. And how so is because you are going to be creating different routes. Now, what I mean by different routes is last week, if you compare last week's code, we just called our server module, created a server, and saw an output on that one website that we ran on that one web page. But what if you want to create multiple pages? Okay. So Express.js framework allows us to create more or render more pages. Okay, but so we use this app instance and we call upon it again and again, as you see, we'll get to it, to create multiple pages.